300% higher than the total air cost travel between London and Rome. Departure fees alone in Africa are 30% above the global average, while taxes, fees, and charges are also 8% higher. Given the lower per capita incomes in Africa, high fares especially tax people out of the air. We may have eventually open sky policy, but then we may end up with empty skies. Africa's aviation growth is held back by very restrictive regulatory environments which limit market size, profitability, and drives up costs. A study by the International Aviation Transport Association shows that liberalizing aviation markets through open skies for just 12 countries alone will add $1.3 billion annually to GDP of those countries and create an additional 150,000 jobs. Just think about it. Essentially, therefore, open skies means more jobs and increased trade and investments. Also, Africa needs a lot of safe skies. Today, unfortunately, despite declining numbers, Africa is the riskiest of skies to fly in. While Africa accounts for 3.4% of all air flight departures, it represents 7% of all air accidents and 37% of total global air fatalities. Among the 200 airlines blacklisted by the European Union, more than 50% of them are African. And as president of the African Development Bank, I find this extremely shocking, and these are totally non-acceptable numbers. The reasons for these are several: old and poorly maintained and inefficient aircrafts, poor safety standards, weak navigation systems, traffic management, and generally weak inspection and oversight, and non-compliance with safety audits. These clearly must change. Air travel must be safe, and the safety should never be compromised. We need to develop airport terminal capacity to expand passenger growth, develop regional aviation hubs to improve connectivity, and upgrade air navigational services and air traffic control to improve overall safety. We must also develop within Africa aircraft maintenance services and strengthen regional and sub-regional aviation safety agencies. Obviously, we can't travel by camels. So I pose the question, of what use are nice-looking airports with all the great navigation instruments if there are no planes taking off from them? Africa will need to procure 970 jets, 700 turboprops over the next 20 years. Financing needs alone is going to exceed $150 billion US. African aviation needs fleet modernization, efficiencies, better connectivity, and much improved quality of services for the exponential growth in the number of passengers. The fact is, Africa faces much higher cost of aircraft purchases due to the relatively small size of most airlines, weak balance sheets for corporate loans, and a lack of access to export credit arrangements. Higher insurance costs, the inability of commercial banks to provide long-term financing, and very high interest rates when actually they do. Africa also doesn't have a single aircraft leasing market, and therefore we lease planes at much higher costs from other parts of the world, sometimes 200% higher than in developed economies. There is therefore a compelling need for us at the African Development Bank to address market failures in aircraft financing. The availability of aviation infrastructure varies a lot across Africa. North, East, and Southern Africa have established hubs in Cairo, Addis Ababa, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. West Africa, on the other hand, lacks a major and effective hub. Mr. Vice President, as the largest economy in Africa, I believe Nigeria should lead this effort and be the integrator for regional air travel. Africa faces huge infrastructure challenges which affect the aviation industry, including airfields, high cost of jet fuel due to poor supplied infrastructure, poor airfield ground lighting with limits to time for operations, further affecting safety and airline economics. In many instances, African pilots, in fact, have ingeniously learned how to fly planes at night or land them at night without electricity. Even they can do it with flashlights. Therefore, we must do all possible to light up and power Africa. Aircrafts cannot take off in the dark, and African economies cannot get off the ground in the dark. That's why the African Development Bank has invested $20 billion in infrastructure over the past 10 years, with over $1 billion alone in the aviation sector. Our investments include building modern airports and terminal extensions in Senegal, Morocco, Kenya, Ghana, Egypt, and Cape Verde, and improving air navigation systems in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've also supported air fleet expansion programs of Ethiopia and more recently, as of 2 weeks ago, of Cote d'Ivoire. We've also supported regional efforts for improving aviation safety and capacity building with the African Union Commission. Your Excellency, Africa must fully implement the 1999 Yamoussoukro decision for open skies. While 20 countries have signed on, the 18-year-old accord still faces significant implementation challenges. Rigid bilateral air service agreements have made it difficult to liberalize the regional aviation markets. We must make regional aviation markets competitive and drive down costs, raise efficiencies, and improve connectivity and convenience. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, I would like to congratulate you and the government on the International Civil Aviation Organization certification of the 2 airports in Nigeria, Abuja and Lagos, as a consequence of meeting global standards. This makes Nigeria the only country with 2 airports that are certified with Icao in West and Central Africa. I think you should clap again for Nigeria. The objective of the African Development Bank is to support the safety and security standard certification of 20 African airports by 2019. The African Development Bank is committed to supporting the Nigerian government's efforts to revitalize the aviation sector. With its focus on national airline development, aviation leasing companies, maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities, the development of aeropolis and cargo terminals for agricultural produce for exports. As the aviation sector improves, Nigeria's ease of doing business will improve even further. You will build, Mr. Vice President, on your remarkable achievements on the ease of doing business. I was very delighted to read that Nigeria has moved on so many levels in the ease of doing business, and I think we have to give it up to the Vice President and all of the team for a fantastic job. The African Development Bank will soon be going to its board with a new aviation sector framework to support the revitalization of the aviation industry in Africa. As I close, Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, from Abuja, a new voice must arise. Africa's aviation time has come. And for this, Mr. Vice President, the voice of Mr. President and your collective leadership will be critical. Together, let's open up the skies of Africa. And together, let's integrate Africa. By so doing, we will build stronger and more resilient economies. And what a great Africa that will be. Thank you very much.
Another warm round of applause for him. Your Excellency, Mr. President, ably represented, while no countries left behind, as we gain altitude in this awesome investment forum, all he's saying is the need for more investment, collaboration, synergy, understanding, equity, and fair play. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Allow me punctuate here as welcome from one of our states here, the Deputy Governor of Imo State, Prince, you're welcome. Honorable Minister of Information, Nigeria, you're welcome. Honorable Minister of State Finance, Nigeria, you're welcome. The CG Immigration, you're welcome. Mr. President, sir, let's culturally speak to our awesome guest. Foremost broadcaster, former DG Nigerian Tourism Development Corporation, Mrs. Omotayo Omotosho. Borrow us your 2 minutes. One round of applause for her, please.
Mr. President, ably represented by our resourceful Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, GCON, I stand on existing protocol. I've been charged here to welcome all our delegates the cultural tourism way, so that you will know the reason why you need to come back to this beautiful, boisterous, colorful nation we call Nigeria. That is for Nigeria. Please give it up. Give it up for Nigeria. Give it up for Nigeria. A nation of almost 200 million, vibrant, hardworking, resourceful, enterprising, dynamic, resilient, hospitable, and progressive people. We bid you welcome. Nigeria is blessed with multiplicity of ethnic groups, tribes, languages, rich cultural and enviable heritage, our various tourist attractions, and friendly people bid you welcome. From the capital territory here in Abuja, the therapeutic scenery of Jabi Lake, the Millennium Park, Wonderland Amusement Park, Abuja Arts and Crafts Village, to the highly resourceful men and women of Ushafa Poultry Village, that when Bill Clinton visited, he did tell me and Senator Kairat Guadabe that he must come back again, just because of the wonderful people of Ushafa Village. Please give it up for Nigeria. From the FCT to the northern part of Nigeria, we shouldn't forget mentioning the intimidating, imposing Zuma Rock, the Farirua waterfall in Nasarawa State, to the breathtaking Arugungu Fishing Festival in Kebbi State. We move on to the colorful Durbar Festival of the core northern states of Nigeria, and that explained why the minister couldn't but organize a mini Durbar Festival yesterday, and we were happy that a cross-section of our delegates were able to witness it. We move from the colorful Durbar Festival to the Gashaga Gumti National Park of Taraba, Adamawa State, stretching to the borders of Cameroon, to Yankari National Park in Bauchi, the Mambila Plateau with his brother, Jos Plateau, with their adoring topography. They are not left out to bid you welcome. Leaving the northern part of Nigeria to our brothers and sisters in the Middle Belt with their unique and graceful Swenge dances, coupled with the colorful traditional masquerades and Atilogu dances of southeastern part of Nigeria, and the colorful boat regatta of the Niger Delta. They bid you welcome. The rolling hills of Obudu Ranch in Cross River State, stretching out to the Agbokum waterfalls in Akwa Ibom, the famous Eyo Masquerade and Black Heritage Festival in Lagos, the Osun-Osogbo and Ojude festivals in the southwestern part, not leaving Nigeria's therapeutic, very, very therapeutic Icao warm spring, when you talk of ecotourism asset. They bid you welcome. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we don't pride ourselves only with the cultural and rich tourism assets of this nation. We also pride ourselves with a very, very intelligent, cerebral products of this country. It will gladden Mr. President ably presented here to know that Nigeria is blessed today in this hall with President of Council Icao as a Nigerian, Dr. Lumiwa Bernard Aliyu. A round of applause for him. President, Africa Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Another round of applause. And we women were not doing badly at all. I'm so proud to say, even in our midst, yet another Nigerian, a woman, making us so proud. Executive Secretary, AFCAC, Africa Civil Aviation Commission, Iyabo Shoshino. We are blessed. Please let's give ourselves a round of applause. And I'm here to let you know that don't leave Nigeria without sovereigning yourself with some appetite of this colorful, rich cultural tourism assets that have been revealed to you today. Don't just come to Abuja and go back from Abuja. If there is a place for you to visit, once again, it is the Nigerian nation. God bless you.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me invite for her remarks Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy, African Union Commission, Her Excellency Dr. Amani Abu Zaid. One round of applause for her, please.
Your Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by His Excellency, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, GCUN, Honorable Senator Haji Sirika, Minister of State for Aviation of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, representatives, honorable representatives of parliaments, honorable ministers, Dr. Lumiwa Bernard Aliyu, President of the Council of the Icao, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, and yes, I am on loan to the AU, so you're still my president as well. Dr. Feng Liu, Secretary General of the International Civil Aviation Organization, Icao, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I am extremely delighted to be with you today in this vibrant and wonderful city of Abuja. We are about to deliberate on financing the development of aviation infrastructure with a focus on Africa. I must say, in my 25 years serving Africa, this is my first time in Abuja, so it has a very special visit to me. His Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, sends his greetings to you all and has requested me to convey his sincere gratitude to his brother, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented here by his Vice President, and to the government of Nigeria and to all our brothers and sisters in Nigeria for hosting this important meeting. We thank you all for the warm-hearted welcome accorded to all of us in Abuja and for the impressive facilities made available for hosting this forum. And in my own name, I would like to particularly thank Mr. President of Icao, and His Excellency Senator Sirika for making sure that I'm here today and doing everything possible to make it happen. I also wish to thank the International Civil Aviation Organization, especially the President, Mr. Alumio Berna Aliou, and the Icao Secretary General, Dr. Fan Liu, in co-hosting this meeting with Nigeria and the African Union, and to commend Icao's No Country Left Behind initiative and your focused interest in the development of air transport in Africa. These are highly appreciated. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the African Union leadership is determined to give a strong and ambitious impetus to Africa's socio-economic development and integration agenda. We duly recognize that air transport is a dynamic mode of transport that has all the potential to speed up Africa's integration and development, and constitutes the main goals, which constitutes the main goals of the AU Agenda 2063. The creation of a single African air transport market was thus included in our strategy as a flagship project based on its high potential for changing the face of Africa substantively. Liberalizing intra-African air transport through the full implementation of the Yamoussoukro decision is essential to improve air connectivity, to lower fares, to ensure the sustainable development of air transport in Africa, and to contribute to economic growth, trade, investment, job creation, and integration of our continent. To give you some facts, as I'm sure you've heard in the previous speeches, aviation currently supports 7 million jobs in Africa and contributes almost $75 billion in GDP to our continent. Over the next years, African passenger numbers are expected to almost triple, to reach over 150 million in 2030. Meanwhile, cargo volumes are projected to rise at a rate of 5.7% per annum. These are compelling and hopeful statistics to boost inter-African trade and job creation. African tourism is another area for potential growth, providing long-term sustainable development of the economy, in which aviation plays a crucial role. Thus, Africa must take advantage of the benefits that aviation provides over the coming decades, and we need you all to do it. We all recognize the importance of surface infrastructure, well-trained teams, and implementation of world-standard safety and security regulations for the sector and for the competitiveness of African aviation. The expressed increase in traffic would certainly require an efficient, seamless, secure, and environmentally friendly aviation infrastructure for the smooth operation of the single market. I would like here to thank Icao and all partners for their work to support the industry in Africa. I also call on all partners to continue their contribution to resource and to capacitate the African aviation sector for the benefit of the whole continent and indeed the world. I also call on our states that have signed up for the Yamoussoukro decision to follow through on their commitment. And I call on all African countries to join the Yamoussoukro decision, considering the strong, impactful benefits it provides to all our people and to our continent. At this point, I am very pleased to inform you that the single African air transport market will be launched during the January 2018 African Union Summit. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my big expectation that this forum would constitute a milestone that helps us articulate a coherent aviation infrastructure priorities for Africa as an enabler for the full implementation of the single African air transport market. Once again, I would like to thank the Federal Republic of Nigeria and Icao for bringing this forum to Africa. I wish you all fruitful deliberations as you consider an appropriate framework for financing the development of aviation infrastructure in Africa. On a separate note, I am entrusted with the mandate of developing infrastructure in Africa and energy and tourism and to integrate the continent. Yesterday in the polo match, they asked me also to train to be a polo player and to play for Nigeria, as if what I have was not enough. So here is a new challenge for me. Now I have to convince His Excellency, the chairperson, to put this in my KPIs. We'll see about that. Excellencies, let us fly Africa's Agenda 2063 with world-class African aviation industry for an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. God bless you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Amani Abu Zaid, Commissioner, Infrastructure and Energy, AUC, for marking a historic moment and the fact that she's we'll not forget that one. Now we've come to the moment for opening comments from the President of the Council of Icao, Dr. Olumuyiwa Bernard Aliyu. Please welcome him.
Yesterday, I told you you are a Nigerian because it's not always very easy to pronounce my first name. Your Excellency, President Muhammad Buhari, GCFR, President and Commander-in-Chief, ably represented by His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GSUN, Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Honorable Minister of State Aviation, Senator Hadi Sirika, His Excellency the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, represented here by Her Excellency Commissioner of Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the President of African Development Bank, and I want to recognize the presence of distinguished senators, honorable members of Assembly, honorable ministers and senior officials of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I also want to recognize the presence of many honorable ministers of transport and aviation infrastructure here present from all over the world. The Secretary General of the International Civil Aviation Organization. I'm also pleased that we are joined at this meeting, and that is what I call them, the chieftains of the aviation industry, the Director General of the International Air Transport Association, Alexandra De Juniac, the Director General of the Airport Council International, Angela Gittins, the Director General of the Civil Air Navigation Services Organization, Jeff Poole, the Director General of the ICCIA, representing all the aircraft manufacturers globally, Jean-Pierre. Honorable Your Excellencies, ambassadors, and permanent representatives on the Council of Icao, Excellencies, Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and indeed a great honor to welcome all of you on behalf of the International Civil Aviation Organization to this third consecutive Icao World Aviation Forum. This is the very first of our IWAF events to be conducted outside the Icao headquarters in Montreal, Canada. I would like to express Icao's deep appreciation to the Federal Republic of Nigeria for its very generous support in hosting this year's IWAF, and to its government and people for the very warm hospitality and excellent facilities which have been provided for us since our arrival in this beautiful city of Abuja. In particular, I wish to express our profound gratitude to His Excellency Vice President Yemi Osinbajo for finding time within his busy schedule to grace us with his presence. May I also extend Icao's warm thanks and gratitude to the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, the AU's New Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, and the African Civil Aviation Commission, all of whom are partnered with Icao in support of this year's IWAF and its important objective for African and worldwide aviation and economic development. By hosting our IWAF meeting in Abuja this year, Icao is reiterating its firm commitment to the purpose and objectives of our No Country Left Behind initiative. The IWAF 3 team further reinforces these points, focusing us on financing the development of aviation infrastructure, which is a key global priority. As many of you are by now familiar, under No Country Left Behind, Icao has reprioritized itself to be a more efficient and valued partner to our member states. This is especially the case regarding the localized assistance and capacity building which is needed towards the effective implementation of our global standards and policies. Indeed, all of our No Country Left Behind efforts seek to ensure that our member states can assess and optimize on a more equitable and dependable basis aviation's numerous socio-economic benefits. In this regard, we should acknowledge the incredible scope and scale of air transport operations today. Aviation is by far the safest mode of transportation. And from a global standpoint, modern commercial aircraft now connect some 10 million passengers daily on over 100,000 flights. This amounted to 3.8 billion passengers and 35 million flights in 2016. And these figures are expected to double over the next 15 years. This incredible volume of operations explains how aviation generates 63.5 million jobs worldwide, carries over half of the 1.2 billion international tourists annually, moves 1/3 of world trade by value, and contributes more than $2.7 trillion to global GDP. For Africa, air transport supports about 7 million jobs and $73 billion in GDP. This is significant, considering that its share of global air transport traffic is an equitably low 2%. These statistics highlight the role of air transport as a critical economic lifeline for many cities, states, and regions, and particularly where international road and rail access is minimal or non-existent. Taken together, the impacts of air transport on nations, societies, and businesses are as numerous as they are substantial. And in light of forecast growth of air transport worldwide, its potential benefits are also set to double in magnitude in the coming decades. This explains why aviation development is such a high priority today, but it also brings to mind the many challenges which face us along that path. This includes the impacts on air transport capacity and efficiency if new infrastructure is not established, the new and more complex systems which must be set in place to manage the coming growth safely, and perhaps most importantly, the skilled local workforce needed to operate all of these new capabilities professionally and sustainably. Simply put, the doubling of passenger traffic and aircraft movements should not result in a doubling of accidents, security incidents, airport and airspace congestion, flight delays, or aviation emissions. These growth challenges will impact all areas of our sector, and it is in anticipation of them that Icao has been establishing global plans which set out clear performance objectives for the air transport sector worldwide. In this regard, our existing global aviation safety plan and global air navigation plan have lately been updated with new performance targets through to the 2030 timeframe. Icao's new global aviation security plan was just endorsed this month by the Icao Council, and we are also now considering 2 new global plans to support our sustainability work in aid of air transport, economic development, and environmental protection. Beyond serving as invaluable planning resources at the state level, Icao global plans play further and very critical roles by helping to assure investor certainty in major air transport upgrade and expansion projects, and by bolstering industry confidence regarding its research and development activities. All our member states' national and regional plans are now required to be consistent with Icao's global plans. Icao World Aviation Forum support and add value to this global planning foundation by bringing states and investors together, by helping each side to understand the other's needs in terms of practical business cases and clearly defined returns, and by fostering new partnerships between governments, private investors, donors, and financing entities. Similarly, our No Country Left Behind efforts are being refined to place greater focus not only on our standards implementation priorities, but also on the global plan targets. This is especially the case with reference to aviation infrastructure development for airports, terminals and runways, air traffic management, communications, navigation and surveillance, meteorological services, cargo transshipment, border control, aircraft maintenance, and aviation training. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but it helps us to appreciate the scope and scale of the challenge which infrastructure development presents to us. For example, based on an analysis by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, the global investment needs for airport infrastructure are estimated at $1.8 trillion from 2015 to 2030. Similarly, the air transport development now needed in Africa will require massive financing commitments, especially considering that most African airports will be exceeding their capacity by just 2020. Air navigation technologies continent-wide are also in need of urgent upgrading. Addressing this aviation infrastructure gap is nothing short of critical to the long-term prosperity of African states, and especially Africa's landlocked and small island developing nations. The economic activity of the continent is improving and still catching up to other regions of the world in certain respects. But it is also characterized by a dynamic and emerging industrial sector and a great potential in servicing a large and developing population. This helps to explain why the African aviation market reflects perhaps the greatest potential for growth of any Icao region today. And let us not lose sight of the fact that an investment in aviation is also an investment in humanity, in socio-cultural and economic integration. It is an investment in a prosperous future for the world's people, businesses, and nations, and ultimately in global peace and security. These observations support very directly the Africa-wide ambitions as formalized under the African Union's Agenda 2063, as well as additional connectivity targets relating to the single African air transport market expected in 2018, the Move Africa initiative, the effective implementation of the African Civil Aviation Policy, as well as the proposed Common African Passport and simplified visa regimes more generally. I would also even go far as to suggest, given the state of many regional road and rail networks today in Africa, and in the increasing affordability of air travel everywhere, that an expanded and better equipped aviation sector will provide the most efficient, comprehensive, and reliable intercity and interstate transport solution for Africa in the 21st century. Air transport is now the global mass transit system, and Africa should take better advantage of it. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to recognizing the important priorities and goals I've just reviewed with you, we must also acknowledge that obtaining the required financing for them has become a challenge for many states. In fact, air transport projects today receive barely 5% of official development assistance globally, and that figure greatly underestimates the potential socio-economic returns. Developing states, in particular, face difficulties due to the cost factors attributed to borrowing, and this may likely worsen in the future as interest rates rise. For us to ensure that no country will be left behind, therefore, concerted efforts must be made by states, regional bodies, financial institutions, donor agencies, and development partners to mobilize more resources for the development of quality aviation infrastructure. At the last IWAF, states were called upon to build transparent, stable, and predictable investment climates, especially by engaging multiple stakeholders and by diversifying their funding sources through private sector investment, business reform, private finance initiatives, and public-private partnerships. Beyond these aims, I would like to emphasize the following 3 points. Firstly, states need to determine their strategic aviation infrastructure plans and targets to be consistent with their global plans. They can accomplish this by conducting that analysis between forecast demand and current capacity and according to their national and regional needs. Business case analysis should also be conducted to accurately estimate the financial requirements for identified projects. This reduces investment rates and aids in the evaluation of future returns. Secondly, institutional, legal, and regulatory frameworks, together with effective monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, should be established to encourage investments and handle the complex nature of project finance transactions. Thirdly, focus should be placed on investment in soft infrastructure, such as human capacity development. Business investment in infrastructure development requires both simultaneous financial investment and enhancement in human capacity. These are directly linked and completely dependent on each other. In addition to the 3 points, determined efforts are now needed specifically here in Africa by regional bodies such as the African Union Commission and NEPAD to include more well-defined aviation projects in the next cycle of the Program for Infrastructure Development for Africa's PIDA Priority Action Plan. It was in recognition of these shared aviation infrastructure challenges we face that the African Union's Specialized Technical Committee on Transcontinental and Interregional Infrastructure, Energy and Tourism, in its Living Declaration and Plan of Action adopted in March this year, urged Icao to assist in convening this conference. Icao, for its part, has established various initiatives specifically aimed at assisting African states. These include the Icao Comprehensive Regional Implementation Plan for Aviation Safety in Africa, or AFRIPLAN, the Comprehensive Regional Implementation Plan for Aviation Safety and Security and Facilitation in Africa, the AFRISEFA Plan, as well as the Human Resources Development Fund to help address the aviation safety, security facilitation, as well as the skilled manpower challenges in the African region. I am pleased that these initiatives are delivering significantly positive results, and that Africa's overall accident rate has significantly decreased. In fact, there were no fatal accidents in Africa in 2015 or 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, Icao remains committed to continue to provide support to our member states in Africa and around the world. And we are fully engaged today at the regional level with the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, the African Civil Aviation Commission, and NEPAD. Icao is always available to provide you sound technical advice on the appropriate infrastructure that meets Icao standards and is consistent with the performance requirements of Icao global plans, as well as the needs of the users. This will ensure that your investments are optimal, cost-effective, and not wasteful. But to achieve our target result, I wish to emphasize actions expected of your governments in order for your states to better align with our global planning. Chief among them is the need to finalize your aviation development priorities into your national development strategies. Secondly, all aspects of your economic policies should be reviewed and refined in light of both current and projected air transport benefits and priorities. Thirdly, you must continue to shore up your capabilities for aviation safety and security oversight, consistent with your responsibilities as Icao member states, but also because improved Icao compliance translates directly into increased aviation benefits and economic growth. Lastly, you need to invest in the next generation of aviation professionals here in Africa through dedicated education and training programs. We must work better together in this regard so that sufficient skilled specialists and managers will be on hand to assure that today's investments are not wasted tomorrow. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, considering the caliber of the speakers and moderators for this event, I am confident that the outcomes of our discussions will produce viable solutions to the aviation financing and development challenges now before us. The declaration and the plan of action for aviation infrastructure development in Africa, which will be discussed on day 2, should further aid in strengthening the perspective of the Lomé Declaration and Plan of Action of the African Union Specialized Technical Committee. In concluding now, I would like to reiterate Icao's this appreciation to the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, its Federal Ministry of Transport and agencies, and to the local organizing committee for the excellent arrangements which have been set out for this landmark event. We have a great deal to accomplish on behalf of future generations and toward the accomplishment by our member states of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And as we work together now towards those noble aims, may I wish you all very successful deliberations, and I want to thank you for listening. I still have one business to conduct. Your Excellencies, as I mentioned, training and capacity building is very important. The development of the next generation of aviation professionals is key to anything that we do, to meet current needs and future technological needs. In this regard, Icao continues to put a lot of emphasis on training and to recognize institutions that are making progress. I'm very pleased to inform you, as has been mentioned by the Minister of State for Aviation, that Nigeria has identified the Nigerian College of Aviation Technology in Zaria as a regional training center of excellence. It is now my honor and privilege to present the certificate of recognition to His Excellency, Mr. Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON.
Another warm round of applause from the Icao President to His Excellency, Mr. Vice President. Produce your speech for the media. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, whilst he settles down to do the usual thing, allow me welcome the dependable co-pilot navigating Nigeria out of every turbulence and steadying the ship of state. No doubt we're gaining altitude. It's getting greener, more purposeful, more impactful. Very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to welcome an erudite professor, Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger, a preacher man, a good man. As he represents His Excellency, Mr. President, join me to welcome Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, Mr. Vice President, sir. Let's celebrate him.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please sit. The Speaker of the Federal House of Representatives, ably represented here by the Chairman, House Committee on Aviation, the Honorable Nkiruka Onyejocha, the Honorable Minister of State for Aviation, Senator Hadi Sirika, the President of the Council of the International Civil Aviation Organization, Dr. Bernard Olumiwa Aliu, the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, and the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union, Her Excellency Dr. Amani Abu-Zaid, the Secretary General of the International Civil Aviation Organization, Dr. Fang Liu, the Director General, International Air Transport Association, IATA, Mr. Alexandre de Juniac, the Honorable Ministers and Heads of Delegations to this auspicious forum, Honorable Ministers of Nigeria here present, Chief Executives, Managing Directors of Financial Institutions, of Aviation Institutions and Organizations here present, Aviation Associations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indebted to the leadership of Icao for the kind invitation to this global gathering of the aviation industry. Nigeria is also honored to be host to this edition of the forum, especially as we're told that this is the first time that the forum is being held outside the Icao headquarters. And so we thank you very much for this special honor. The central concern of this forum is financing the development of aviation infrastructure. And we think that this is timely and appropriate for two reasons. The first is a general one. World aviation is a major economic force, and there is no question that its exponential growth in the coming years is guaranteed. According to the 2017 Aviation Benefits Report, and I quote, current forecasts indicate that the air traffic volumes will double in the next 15 years, characterized by a 4.6% annual growth rate for passenger traffic and a 4.4% for freight traffic. And quoting estimates by the Cross-Industry Air Transport Action Group, ATAG, the report notes that the total economic impact, which is direct, indirect, induced, and tourism connected, of the global aviation industry reached $2.7 trillion and some 3.5% of the world's GDP in 2014. The air transport industry also supported a total of 62.7 million jobs globally. It provided 9.9 million direct jobs. Airlines, air navigation, service providers, and airports directly employed over 3 million people. The civil aerospace sector, the manufacture of aircraft, systems, and engines, employed 1.1 million people, and a further 5.5 million people worked in other on-airport positions. 52.8 million indirect, induced, or tourism-related jobs were supported by aviation, and these are 2014 figures. Obviously, it's been increasing yearly. It is clear, therefore, that the critical responsibility of all stakeholders is to see and to ensure that this phenomenal growth trajectory of the industry is managed and regulated for safety, for efficiency, taking into account sustainable, environmentally friendly policies and regulations. But perhaps more importantly, for our own purposes today, we are concerned about ensuring that in this present and perhaps future economic boom, none, especially economically weaker countries, should be left behind. And the only guarantee against this are forums such as this that enable stakeholder interrogation on the problems of access to capacity and capital for developing economies. Now, which brings up the second reason for the timeliness of this forum: the peculiar challenges of financing aviation infrastructure in Africa. While everyone agrees, for example, that the growth of aviation in Africa will be good for intra-African trade, will be good for African integration, and by such means improve the economies of African countries, there is little commitment to financing aviation infrastructure in Africa beyond the mere words. The evidence is that it is difficult for aviation stakeholders and even states to access financing to build or rehabilitate airports, telecommunications equipment, meteorology infrastructure, cargo warehouses, etc. Indeed, and here I quote a background paper available at this meeting, that there is also no financing arrangement to implement the Aviation System Block Upgrades, the ASBU, of the Global Air Navigation Plan. It also appears that at least insofar as Africa is concerned, neither in the Program for Infrastructural Development for Africa, PIDA, nor in the new Partnership for African Development, NEPAD, is the development of aviation infrastructure given any priority. And so there is no better opportunity than this conference for a thorough engagement on the whys and wherefores, but more importantly, the practical steps that are required to ensure that African aviation is not left behind in the growth story of world aviation. The key to achieving this objective is collaboration. And there are several good stories that we in Nigeria can tell about collaboration. The African Development Bank is in discussions with us on financing Nigeria's Integrated Aviation Master Plan, which involves, amongst other components, the building of a maintenance, repair, and overhaul center, and the financing of a private sector-led national carrier. We are, as we said, in quite serious discussions on how we can obtain this support. Icao has also committed to supporting the establishment of an aerospace university in Nigeria. And we've begun the processing of concessioning some of our airports, some of our major airports. The ultimate objective being to bring in the best-in-class investor operators to manage and run these facilities. We believe that local and international private capital is the surest way to fund aviation infrastructure. But we must focus attention on de-risking private sector investments in infrastructure, and importantly, reducing the cost of funds that will go towards aviation infrastructure. I'm sure that somewhere in the course of discussions today, or perhaps tomorrow, some of these issues will be considered. And we hope that they will be given the kind of attention that will obviously be required to reach some concrete results or some concrete suggestions as to how in particular to reduce the cost of funds that go into aviation infrastructure, especially for African aviation environments. Let me again commend the leadership of Icao for bringing the aviation world together here in Abuja to discuss a subject of profound importance to African economies, and in particular, I must also commend the Honourable Minister of State for Nigeria for Aviation, Hadi Sirika, and his team for the hard work that has gone into hosting this event. And so let me invite you to enjoy the sights and sounds and the culinary delights of Abuja. And on this note, it's my very special pleasure and privilege to declare open this special forum of the Icao World Aviation Forum, financing the development of aviation infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Let's celebrate His Excellency, Mr. Vice President. Your Excellency, Mr. President, ably represented by His Excellency, Mr. Vice President. Very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have the field in sight. Necessity therefore is laid on us to land this craft, refuel, and prepare to taxi again and be upstairs. It is therefore my singular honor and privilege at this juncture that we rise for the national anthem of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, after which we break for 15 minutes tea break, coffee break, and then we'll resume further sessions. Your Excellencies, please, may we rise. The national anthem, please. Dear delegates, please hold position as Mr. President departs. Your Excellencies. Tea break, 15 minutes. We're back here by 15 minutes past 12 Nigerian time. We appreciate you, distinguished delegates. Thank you very much. Let's be on time to start the business of the day. Thank you.